Prevalent Vulnerability Index or PVI. Vulnerability is a particular condition or conditions determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes which increase the susceptibility of an individual, a community, assets, or systems to the impacts of hazards. And vulnerability index is a specific measure that captures the extent or scope of that conditions that increases the susceptibility of individuals or communities to the impacts of hazards. Index. Prevalent Vulnerability Index is a measurement that measures the extent of vulnerability in a given country or under a set of conditions. PVI measures the extent of vulnerability in a given country, as we said. It tries to quantify the prevalence of vulnerabilities. If vulnerability is dominant in a condition, PVI explores how much vulnerability is there using some quantitative indicators and measurements. PVI characterizes the predominating vulnerability conditions reflected in exposure in prone areas, that is disaster prone areas, socioeconomic fragility and lack of social resilience, aspects that favor the direct impact and the indirect and intangible impact in case of occurrence of a hazard event. This index is a composite indicator that depicts the comparatively a situation or pattern in a country and its causes or factors. In economics, the composite indicators are mathematical combinations or aggregations of a set of indicators to summarize complex or multi-dimensional issues. So here the PVI or Prevalent Vulnerability Index captures the multi-dimensional features of the vulnerability conditions. So here PVI is calculated based on 3 different criteria, and each criterion has 8 specific indicators. The first criterion is the indicators of exposure and susceptibility. We will call them SE. S for susceptibility and E for exposure, and being part of the PVI calculation, we will denote this as PVIES. Second one is indicators of socioeconomic fragility. We will call them SF or PVISF. Here S for socioeconomic and F for fragility. And third one is indicators of resilience or indicators of lack of resilience. Here L means lack and R is resilience. So in terms of the first criteria, the indicators of exposure and susceptibility. In case of PVIES, exposure and physical susceptibility, the indicators represent susceptible population, assets, investment, production, livelihoods, essential patrimony, and human activities. Other indicators are also relevant to this set of indicators. Here ES means exposure and susceptibility. First ES1 is population growth, then another indicator is urban growth, third indicator is population density, and fourth indicator is population poverty population below $1 per day PPP, then capital stock, imports and exports of goods and services in an economy, gross domestic fixed investment, arable land and permanent crops. These are the indicators with which the exposure and susceptibility term is calculated. These indicators are variables that reflect a notion of susceptibility when faced with dangerous events, whatever the nature of severity of these. To be exposed and susceptible is a necessary condition for the existence of risk. In terms of indicators of socioeconomic fragility or SF, the PVI SF can be represented by indicators such as poverty, human insecurity, dependency, illiteracy, social disparities, unemployment, inflation, debt, and environmental degradation. The indicators are listed here. Here SF means socioeconomic fragility. So the SF1 or first indicator here is the human poverty index or HPI. Then dependence as proportion of working age population. So working age population and their dependence and its proportion will be focused here. So social disparity, it is the third indicator. Social disparity, concentration of income measured using Gini index. Unemployment as percent of total labor force. Fifth indicator is inflation, food prices, and sixth indicator is dependency of GDP growth of agriculture. Seventh indicator is debt servicing, and eighth indicator is human-induced soil degradation. Here, the last criterion is the indicators of resilience or indicators of lack of resilience, LR. So in terms of LR, we can say that the lack of resilience, it is seen as vulnerability factor, may be represented at all levels by means of complementary or inverted treatment of a number of variables related to human development levels, human capital, economic redistribution, governance, financial protection, collective perceptions, preparedness to face crisis situations, and environmental protection. This collection of indicators on their own, and particularly where they are disaggregated at the local level, could help in the identification and orientation of actions that should be promoted, strengthened, and prioritized in order to increase human security. Here the indicators are, we know what LR is. It is lack of resilience. So LR1 is Human Development Index or HDI. Next one is GDI or Gender Related Development Index. Third one is social expenditure on pensions, health, and education. Fourth indicator is Governance Index. Fifth indicator is insurance of infrastructure and housing. Then number of television sets per 1,000 people. Number of hospital beds per 1,000 people. Environmental Susceptibility Index or ESI. These are the indicators, and these indicators are variables that captures the macro fashion, the capacity to recover from or absorb the impact of dangerous phenomena, whatever their nature and severity, to not be in the capacity to adequately face disasters is a vulnerability condition. Although in a strict sense, it is necessary to establish thus this with reference to all feasible types of hazard. So here, after the calculation is made, we can see such types of tables. So here we'll try to interpret the table. Here we'll understand or learn the how to read the graph or how to interpret the graph. In the right hand side, we can see the evaluation criteria. PVI varies between 0 and 100, where 80 and above means very high vulnerability. 40 to 80 means high vulnerability. 20 to 40 means medium vulnerability, and 20 and less than 20 means low vulnerability. So if the value PVI value is within this, we will be interpreting them accordingly. So in the left hand side, we are seeing a hypothetical country X, and its value in 1985. So in the first row, the table shows that the PVIES, and that is exposure and susceptibility, and the exposure and susceptibility value is 29.963. So in terms of exposure and susceptibility, the country X is in medium vulnerable or facing medium vulnerability to that specific hazard event. In the second row, it is PVI-SF. In terms of PVI-SF or socioeconomic fragility, the value is 36.847. So in terms of socioeconomic fragility, the country X is in medium vulnerability, so that to that specific hazard event. The third row, in terms of PVI-LR, it is lack of resilience. The value is 63.961. So in terms of lack of resilience, country X is highly vulnerable to that specific hazard event. The last row is the total PVI, which is calculated and found by adding all the three values above and simply by dividing by 3. The total PVI is 43.59. So which means in terms of PVI or Prevalent Vulnerability Index, in 1985, country X is highly vulnerable to a particular hazard event. So this is the way we can read. It is PVI of the hypothetical country X, the PVI of year 2000, 2005 and 2007. So in these years we can interpret the table based on the evaluation criteria mentioned in the right hand. So if it is 80 and above, that is a very high vulnerability. 40 to 80, that is a high vulnerability. 20 to 40, medium vulnerability, and 20 or less than 20 is low vulnerability. So we can interpret this table in terms of different years, and we can make different types of calculations and intakes and time series analysis.